Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Today I invite you into a legend where sunlight was not only a gift, but a bloodline, and where one forgotten daughter learned to hear what others ignored. Circe was born in the golden palace of Helios, surrounded by divine brightness, powerful names, and ancient pride. Yet beneath that splendor, she felt the pull of quieter things, the bitter scent of crushed leaves, the hidden strength of roots, the strange language of flowers closing under moonlight. Before she became the feared woman of Aeaea, before sailors whispered her name across dark waters, she was a lonely goddess, learning that power does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it waits in a cup, in a song, in the silence before a door opens. Far from the shining palace of the sun, on an island wrapped in mist, wolves and lions walked gently around a stone house, and a woman sang at her loom while the sea carried broken men toward her shore. When Odysseus and his exhausted crew reached Aeaea, they believed they had found rest, food, and shelter. But in Circe's house, hospitality came with a question hidden inside every cup. What does a man become when hunger, fear, and desire are stripped bare? This is a story of magic, exile, transformation, and the dangerous meeting between a woman who could change men's shapes and a hero who refused to lose his own. Before we begin this epic, I have a small request that means a lot to me. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The greatest reward for all the effort I put into creating these epics is your support through subscribing to my channel. If you enjoy my content and want me to continue creating more, your subscription and like truly give me great motivation. Also, don't forget to share your thoughts with me in the comments. Your comments not only encourage me, but also help me understand what kind of epics and stories you would like to see on this channel. Thank you so much in advance for your support. Take a deep breath, relax your mind, and let the rhythm of this ancient legend guide you. Wishing you a peaceful sleep. The epic of Daughter of the Sun, Circe and the Bewitched Island begins now. Morning in the palace of Helios began before the world seemed awake. Golden light moved through the courtyards like water, and the breath of the horses rose in warm clouds before the gates. Divine servants polished the bronze parts of the sun chariot, loosened the reins, and prepared the order that would climb into the sky without a raised voice. When Circe was small, she watched all this from the shadow of the columns. When her father appeared, every body in the courtyard grew a little straighter. His light did not only brighten the space around him, it reminded everyone of their place. Circe had been born inside that splendor, but it never felt like home. One day, Helios saw her watching from the shade and told her to look not only at the shadow but also at the light. Circe raised her head. She looked at the brightness until her eyes hurt, then lowered them again to a thin blade of grass pushing up between the stones. Everyone in that palace seemed to have a clear shape and purpose. Helios commanded, and the sky opened for him. Perseus, quiet and deep, carried the feeling of hidden currents underwater. Aeaea, even as a child, walked as if rule already belonged to him. Circe learned to take up less space in the same rooms. She was not always treated cruelly, but little attention was given to her, and her silence grew there. One evening, Perseus found her at the edge of the garden, bent over a plant others treated as decoration. Circe's fingers followed the veins of the leaves. Perseus watched for a long time before saying, in a cool voice, that some things did not grow only because they were beautiful. Circe gave no answer. The sentence carried both warning and recognition, and she felt both. Circe's loneliness was not the simple sadness of being left alone. The palace was full of voices. Feasts were held, songs were sung, and great names were spoken. Yet in the middle of those words, Circe often heard what people did not say. Near Helios, power meant shining, commanding, and being seen. Aeaea believed this without question. One day he noticed a small branch in her hand and asked why she wasted time on such worthless things. Circe did not hide it. She said there was a bitter scent in its veins, and when it broke it gave a white sap like milk. Aeaea laughed and said, in his own way, that such things did not suit the blood of the sun. Circe did not laugh. She understood that knowledge did not always arrive with noise. Some powers did not speak with the sound of chariots or swords. Some left only a sharp smell on the fingers. At night, the palace changed. Gold grew pale, the courtyard seemed wider, and the certainty of daytime softened. Circe would go into the outer garden and sit near the stone pools. There she watched flowers close when the moon rose. A blossom that showed its face all day folded inward at night, as if each leaf chose how much of itself to reveal. Once, a nymph passing by startled when she saw Circe sitting there and asked what she was doing in the cold. Circe said flowers did not speak in the daytime, but at night they listened better. The nymph found the answer strange, but she did not laugh. Circe's face was too serious. In Helios's palace, Circe's name was not often part of great decisions. No one spoke prophecies for her. No one asked which throne, journey, or kingdom would someday be tied to her. Still, certain eyes had begun to notice her. Perseus saw how long she stayed in the garden. Aeaea noticed her quiet stubbornness. Even Helios sometimes understood that, inside his bright order, his daughter listened to something else. Circe was not yet the feared woman of Aeaea. The stone house, the tame wolves, the lions, and the loom had not yet reached her life, but the first separation had already begun. It began with being unheard at crowded tables, with standing in shadow in the middle of light, with bending toward the small veins of the earth while others looked toward the sky. Circe was the daughter of the sun, but under the sun she wanted most to know what the soil kept hidden. One morning, before Helios's chariot rose, Circe bent over a small water bowl left near the courtyard. A leaf had fallen into it during the night. When the first light touched the water, the leaf changed color, and a dark vein appeared beneath the green. Circe turned it with her fingertip. A driver of Helios stopped and told her children should not stir such things. Circe did not lift the leaf out. She only asked why it closed at night and opened again in the morning. The servant shrugged. For most in the palace, plants were ornaments. Circe felt that even this small leaf held its own order. Later that day, she heard Perseus and Helios speaking inside. Their words were not clear, but her own name reached her. She did not enter. She stepped back and understood for the first time that others could speak about her future without looking at her face. It did not make her cry. It opened a cool space inside her. That evening at the table, Circe sat farther from Aeaea. While he spoke of future lands and the way powerful names were remembered, she watched the thin lines on the fruit before her. Helios saw her attention drift and asked what she was thinking. Circe said fruit changed its smell when it grew too ripe. A brief silence followed. Aeaea laughed softly. Helios did not, but he did not hide that this was not the answer expected at his table. Circe knew she had said nothing wrong. She had only spoken from a place where others did not want to listen. Later that night she returned to the garden and waited beside the flower she had watched before. Moonlight lay on the stones. The air carried a faint bitterness. The flower closed. Circe did not hear a voice, but the silence seemed to open a narrow path meant only for her. As she went back inside, she thought the flower had not looked at her, and yet it had known her. Circe no longer went to the gardens only to walk. When Helios's light spread across the marble, she left the wide courtyards and followed the less visible paths. There, beside the flowers raised for beauty, grew lower plants that most people did not notice. Some left a sharp scent on the fingers. Some gave a white sap when broken. Circe began to know them not by names, but by reactions. The ones that turned toward sun, the ones that preferred shade, the ones that grew bitter when cut, and the ones that softened in water. The words of gods came from above. The knowledge of plants came from below, patiently and in silence. Her first trials were small. She crushed a leaf between stones, let its scent fall into water, and dropped the water onto a dry stem. Nothing happened at once, but the next day, a little life showed at the tip. She tried again. Another day, she found a small bird weak beside the garden wall. She touched a few drops of an herbal mixture to its beak. After a while, it lifted its head and grew quiet in her palm. She did not show this to anyone. Open power in the palace was always tied to pride, duty, marriage plans, or the order of Helios. What Circe had found had not yet taken full shape. She used stone bowls, let water sit in sun or shade, and tested the same leaf at different hours. One mixture grew gentle after waiting. Another turned bitter. She remembered results through scent and touch. In this way, pharmaca became not a grand word for magic, but a living craft of measure and timing. It pleased her, but it frightened her too. The bird had healed, but something in it had also become still. She sensed how thin the line was between healing and making a creature obey. A scent could call sleep. A sap could soften fear. A root could make the body heavy. The same thing could be medicine or poison depending on the measure. Her power had not fallen from the sky like fire. It grew from crushed leaves, waiting water, and small changes in breath. Perseus noticed how long Circe spent in the garden. One evening, while Circe laid herbs on a cloth, her mother's shadow fell across the stone path. Perseus looked at the leaves and then at the green stains on her daughter's fingers. She said plants were not simply taken. When something was asked of them, they left something in return. It sounded like advice and prophecy at the same time. Circe lowered her head, but did not move her hands. The warning did not stop her. It only made her understand that this was no game. Later, a young nymph came near the bowls, curious about the quiet girl's work. Circe did not send her away, but she did not uncover the vessels either. When the nymph noticed the scent on Circe's hand, she paused as if she had heard a distant song. Circe saw that small drifting of the mind. Both pretended nothing had happened, yet both understood that the scent had touched her. Circe learned that her power could leak into the air even when she did not intend it. Soon the servants grew used to the smells Circe carried from the garden. One hot day, when an attendant complained of pain in his head, she gave him a light mixture. She did it not to display power, but because she had seen the strain around his eyes. The effect came slowly. First the tension left his face, then his gaze wandered. He moved for a while as if he followed Circe's voice, doing what was asked of him without it being clear whether the choice was fully his. That evening, as Circe sorted herbs, her hands trembled. She was not afraid of failure. She was afraid because the mixture had worked. The water that healed a bird had also softened a man's mind. The same knowledge had two faces, and she would have to learn both through care, measure, and sometimes bitter experience. The power of swords was visible. Hers hid at the bottom of a cup behind a scent, in a trace as thin as a fingerprint. She did not burn the leaves that night. She put them in a dark vessel and sat beside it for a long time. The plants did not speak, yet their silence now felt like a test. Perseus's warning returned to her. A root pulled from the earth changed the soil. A crushed leaf opened a scent that could not be returned. A healed creature carried a mark in its behavior. Magic was not only the result, every effect left a trace. This knowledge made Circe slower and more careful. Others carried power as a right. Circe felt it first as responsibility, bitter as crushed herbs. She no longer judged each experiment only as success or failure. If a mixture healed but made a bird too calm, that belonged in one vessel. If a scent made a nymph drift, Circe had to know which door of the mind it had entered. No one in the palace knew that these small acts would one day change the fate of sailors. Circe did not know it either. She only thought of which herb to gather next, which water to leave waiting, and which measure to reduce. Great myths often begin with movements no one takes seriously. A hidden gesture becomes the root of a name later spoken with fear. Circe also changed through these trials. Once, being unseen had only hurt her. Now she understood that invisibility gave her room to work. When no one watched, she prepared vessels, gathered ignored plants, and followed unnoticed scents. This secrecy did not weaken her. It taught her that power could grow far from the crowd. After that night, the vessels hidden in her room multiplied. They looked alike, but each held a different history, measure, and effect. Circe had opened the door of her knowledge. Behind it, healing and danger waited with the same patience. She had met power not with pride, but with a shiver. At the table of Helios, even light seemed arranged. Cups were polished, fruits were placed by color, and honey scented the golden plates. Those who sat there gathered not only to eat, but to make bloodline and power visible. Circe now stayed quieter at these feasts than before. Once her silence had gone unnoticed. Now others sensed that some knowledge hid inside it. Her gaze rested not on the taste of food, but on steam, scent, and mixture. While divine guests spoke of abundance, Circe noticed which herb could make wine heavy. Aeaea watched her with mockery. To him, power meant command, land, rule, and visible strength. His sister's interest in leaves and scents seemed small and secretive. Yet there was unease inside his mockery. Her power did not shine like a sword, but it left a mark. Once, when a young servant almost dropped a cup, Circe only looked at him. His movement slowed, his fingers tightened, and an unnatural calm settled over his face. The moment did not explode, but several eyes turned toward Circe. Later, when fruit was cut before her, a darker scent rose from it. Others thought it was only ripeness. Circe sensed that, served with the herb beside it, it could make the mind heavy. She said nothing, but her gaze stayed too long. Those around Helios understood that she no longer saw the table as only a place of plenty. To her, it had become a field of hidden effects. That made the palace draw back from her. Harmless things could become something else in her hands. Perseus saw this and looked away too quickly. Helios showed no quick anger. His anger felt less like flame and more like a fixed weight on the horizon. He did not ask openly what Circe had done, but the order of the table had been broken. Around her chair an invisible space opened. Aeaea spoke more sharply, as if trying to make his own power brighter beside hers. Perseus said nothing, and that silence hurt Circe most. Before Helios's decision became final, Circe and Perseus were alone for a short time. It was not a loud confrontation. Perseus looked at her daughter with the stillness of the sea before a storm. Circe had thought she did not expect protection, yet she felt one word from her mother might change the weight of the hurt. Perseus did not deny her daughter's power, but she did not defend her either. In that silence, Circe learned that family does not always protect. Sometimes it is the quiet channel through which judgment passes. The ancient tales do not describe her leaving as a trial. They show her most clearly on Aeaea, in the stone house, beside the loom and the herbs. Still, the road to that island can be felt in the distance that grew at Helios's table. When the decision came, Circe did not shout or plead. She watched the last light in the cups as the feast was cleared. In the shining surface, she saw her own reflection, eyes bright with the blood of the sun, a face holding a loneliness from the sea. That night she gathered her garden vessels. Some herbs she set aside to take with her. Some she returned to the soil. The palace walls no longer seemed high, because she now knew a life outside them waited. She did not yet know whether that life would be punishment or the place where her power would take its true form. But behind her mother's silence, her father's distance, and her brother's smile, something besides pain was born. In a place where no table ruled her, she would learn as much as the plants and the night would teach. The palace did not become sad as she prepared to leave. The horses were still readied for morning, the gates still opened, and the cups were still polished. Her departure was treated like a small adjustment in a vast order. That hurt most. She was not driven out like a disaster. She was moved away like a shadow the palace did not wish to see. She chose a stone mortar, cloths, dried roots, simple knives, and weaving tools. They were not the belongings of a splendid exile, but they would become the quiet center of the life she would build. People did not insult her openly. The pain lay in subtler things. Servants grew careful, nymphs ended conversations quickly, Aeaea smiled too sharply. A person does not always understand exclusion from closed doors. Sometimes it is felt when eyes pass by without fully touching. Before leaving, Circe went once more into the garden and found the flower she had watched at night. It looked smaller now among other stems. She did not touch it. She only bent and smelled the soil. What had once felt like a whisper now seemed like a sign. The light of the palace would remain behind, but there she had learned to read darkness. What she carried to Aeaea was not only vessels and roots, it was that way of seeing. Exile is not the same as never belonging. A person must first believe she might belong to feel the cold of being pushed away. Circe carried that cold with her. The first fire she would light on Aeaea would burn partly against it. Yet the cold also forced her to think of her power, apart from anyone's approval. The road to Aeaea opened outward, but also inward, toward the place where she would shape her own name. The sea voyage slowly changed everything that had left the palace of Helios. At first, Circe still carried the warmth of the golden courtyards. Then wind and salt thinned that warmth and turned it into memory. Those who carried her spoke little. Their silence held no mockery and no pity, only the cold duty that follows a decision already made. Circe stood near the edge of the deck and listened to the waves strike the ship. When the palace disappeared, her anger did not flare. She felt instead a deep emptiness, like a plant pulled from its soil. When Aeaea appeared on the horizon, it did not look splendid. It looked closed. The shore was cut by rocks. The forest came close to the sea, stretching branches forward like a living thing measuring whoever came. Thin smoke rose in places. Sunlight entered the leaves in broken pieces. When Circe stepped onto the shore, dark, damp soil pressed under her feet. The island was strange after the warm stones of the palace, but she soon found something inside that strangeness. Aeaea was not silent. Leaves, insects, far animal sounds, resin, salt, and wind all moved together. No marble steps waited for her. No servant announced her name. No gate opened because of her blood. Sea foam touched her dress. Wind tangled her hair. Salt stayed on her lips. These small discomforts felt real. In the palace, perfection could make a person forget the body. Here there was cold, thorn, stone, and effort. As Circe carried her belongings inland, she learned that even one born divine could grow tired while settling in a new place. The ship that brought her soon left. Its sound faded. Then the sea swallowed it. Only then did exile become final. To be alone in a palace was one thing. There, walls, servants, tables, and distant families still existed. Here, loneliness was the air itself. Circe gathered her vessels and cloths. She knew she could not make a home before she knew the island. She followed the paths, watched where water ran, where soil softened, and which plants preferred shade. In the heart of the island stood a stone house. Later stories would make it seem like a palace in the forest, but to Circe it first felt like a cold shell that had to be inhabited. Its walls were strong, its doors heavy, and the rooms slowed the sea wind before letting it in. Circe cleaned the courtyard, sorted dry grass, and prepared one room for mixtures and another for weaving. She did not hurry. Each act was an answer to the island, a promise that she would not be swallowed by it. She opened and closed the doors, watched the light, and learned the sound of each room. The house did not yet carry her scent. It smelled of old stone, salt, animal fur, and time. As she placed her first vessels inside, an unspoken bargain began. She would not turn the house into a copy of the palace. Aeaea would press its own order on her, and she would build her center inside that order without disappearing into it. When night came, the island showed another face. Shadows lengthened, rocks leaned hard against the sea, and wind spoke low through the leaves. Circe closed the door, but she knew exile would not end behind wood and stone. Far off, a wolf howled. Another answered. The sounds did not come closer. They circled as if showing the island's borders. There was no Helios, no Perseus, no Aeaea. There was only darkness, sea, and unseen animals. Circe did not deny fear. Fear is sometimes the most honest knowledge of being alive. She sat by the threshold until morning with a small knife and dried herbs on her knees. No claws struck the door. The wolves only waited. At dawn she opened the door and saw two dark shapes at the forest edge. Their eyes shone. They did not attack and they did not flee. That space between attack and flight would become the field of her future power. In the morning, Circe walked through the house again and saw by day what had frightened her at night. Wolf tracks marked the door. Dry leaves had gathered in the courtyard. Damp lines darkened the back wall. In the palace, these would have been flaws. Here they were signs of settlement. She opened doors, brought her things into the sun, and hung cords for drying herbs. Work changed the shape of fear. The urge to flee gave way to the will to make order. By evening she spread one palace cloth on the stone floor. Its golden stitching looked strange, too bright and too tied to an old life. She sat on it and sorted leaves. In that way, what remained from the palace entered the work of Aeaea. The past was not erased. It changed meaning. Circe had arrived as the daughter of Helios. She would learn to become the woman of the island. At sunset, tiredness weighed more than fear. That was a good sign. Work was teaching her body that the island was not only threat, but also place. She sat at the threshold and watched the darkening sea. Light withdrew, but the world did not vanish. It became something that had to be listened to more carefully. That new way of looking helped her take hold of Aeaea. She began to think not only of where she had been left, but of what could be built there. The source of water, the direction of wind, the place for herbs, the paths of animals, the safest place for night fire. Exile was still exile, but it was no longer only a punishment she had to endure. It was becoming a space where she could live. The island's hardness remained, yet within it Circe found the first line of her own rhythm. The animals of Aeaea came towards Circe first by keeping their distance. Wolves appeared at the forest edge and did not vanish when she turned. Lions showed themselves less often, lying on warm rocks or moving near the house with slow, heavy steps. In the first days, Circe did not treat every sound as an attack, but she did not ignore any sound either. She sat at the door and watched when the animals came, which scents made them draw back, and which winds made them uneasy. The patience she had learned from plants grew larger here. Animals, like plants, had to be listened to before being touched. She did not chain them or call them with shouts. She prepared soft scents from crushed leaves, left some at the courtyard edge, rubbed some into her clothing and dropped some near water bowls. Scent was a gentler language than command. When a wolf first came close, Circe did not move. It was thin, with an old wound near one ear. She only set water before it. The wolf smelled the threshold, the rooms, and the woman, then lowered its head and drank. That small act was the first sign of the strange order to come. As her bond with the animals grew, Circe learned the different shapes of fear. Wolves spoke hunger first through their noses. Lions carried pain heavily and tried to keep dignity even when wounded. Birds flew at the smallest change. Snakes stayed on warm stones as if they heard nothing. Circe watched these differences not to rule them by force, but to find the right way to approach. The same scent did not work on every animal. A smoke that calmed a wolf troubled a lion. An oil that soothed one wound irritated another. Her magic became more careful because of the living variety around her. One day a wounded lion cub came from the rocks. It limped and cried softly, far from its mother's shadow. When Circe approached, it showed its teeth. Pain sharpens wildness even in a small body. Circe slowed her breath and let the scent of crushed herbs move with the wind. The fear in the cub did not disappear, but its body loosened. She knelt, touched the paw, removed the sharp piece, and spread a cool mixture on the wound. The moment was brief, but the island saw that Circe carried not only the power to change, but also the power to know pain. The cub did not leave after healing. At first it stayed outside the courtyard. Later it slept near the threshold and followed Circe when she carried herbs. She did not give it a name. Naming could mean possession, and she did not want to own it. Still, a recognition grew between them. When the lion lifted its head, Circe knew whether pain had returned. When she came home, the lion knew her steps. In time, a strange calm formed around the house. The animals did not lose their wildness. Their eyes still kept the dark knowledge of the forest, but near Circe, they learned to wait instead of attack, to smell instead of bare their teeth, to stand instead of run. This was not simple taming. It was an agreement between powers sharing the same island. Circe understood more clearly that her magic was not only command. Sometimes the deepest rule was to touch the fear inside a living thing and turn it toward another movement. To outsiders, the sight would later seem impossible. Lions resting by stone walls, wolves moving through shade, animals stepping aside while Circe filled water bowls. It was peaceful and frightening at the same time. The expected order had been turned around. The wild did not attack. The exiled woman did not hide. Sometimes Circe stood in the courtyard and felt that the animals respected not only her, but the invisible boundary around the house. Stone did not draw that boundary. Scent, habit, patience, and magic did. Years later, when Odysseus's men reached the house, they would see wolves and lions behaving like gentle dogs. They would not know the long history behind that calm. To them, it would be more frightening than violence. But for Circe, this period was when Exile began to become a kingdom. The stone house was no longer only the place where she had been left. It became a center where lions slept by the door, herbs dried in the rooms, water bowls filled the courtyard, and wolves moved silently at night. No one had given her the place denied to her in the palace. She had made it. There were no ceremonies in this kingdom, but repeated acts took the place of ceremony. At the same hours, Circe filled the bowls. The wounded came first, the young later. The strongest sometimes waited behind. No one announced this order. The island accepted it over time. Circe did not think of herself as their master. She had seen enough mastery in Helios's house. On Aeaea, she wanted another power, a nearness where fear did not vanish but did not become attack. The animals became the first witnesses of that power. Their calm eyes knew her patience before they knew her magic. This hidden root would one day be called enchantment by strangers, yet it was also made of attention, mistakes, retreats, and the hard work of living beside wildness without destroying it. On Aeaea, time did not move by palace calendars. Days were measured by when herbs should be gathered, when resin thickened, which way the wind turned, and when the sea grew quiet. Circe now knew the island paths even in darkness. In the mornings, she went down to the shore, gathered the salt left by waves, then turned into the forest to sort the plants that grew in shade. In the afternoons, she kept her mixtures in the cool rooms of the stone house. Toward evening, she filled the bowls for the animals that came into the courtyard. At night, she sat before her loom. Her song began there, low and steady, touching the stone walls, slipping through the threads, and mixing with the leaves outside. The loom carried her loneliness without complaint. As the threads passed through her fingers, she did more than weave cloth. She put the day's signs, the sound of the sea, the waiting animals, and the sense of plants into order. The old tales call her a fair-haired goddess who spoke with human language and was feared by men. Yet the real magic in her house was not only in cups or jars of herbs. The song was also a path. Whoever heard it first wondered where it came from, then forgot the speed of his steps, then heard his own fear from farther away. Circe knew this when she sang. Her voice did not attack. It invited, delayed, and opened a soft road inward. Her song became part of the island's daily rhythm. In the morning, she sang short lines while sorting leaves or setting her hand to work. At night, when she sat at the loom, the melody changed. It moved longer and slower, like mist traveling from the shore into the forest. She did not treat the song as a loud spell. It was not a command that forced the listener. It was a current that made a path inside the mind of anyone already willing to approach. A person who heard it might stop, then listen, then fail to remember exactly when he had moved closer to the door. The song was as strong as her mixtures, because what enters through the ear can be noticed later than what enters through the cup. Sailors sometimes came near the island. Some saw smoke from the shore and turned back at once. Some landed for water. Some heard animal sounds in the forest and returned to their ships. Not all who came reached Circe's house. Not all who reached it met the same fate. Circe did not judge people at first glance. She weighed the hunger, fear, roughness, curiosity, and disrespect that had brought them to her door. Some men lost courage when they saw the animals around the house. Some took courage from the fact that the animals did not attack and walked on with greater arrogance. Circe saw the difference. What she placed on the table depended on what she saw. Her hospitality was warm on the surface, but deep below it was careful and testing. For that reason, her name became a tale mixed with fear. Sailors passing near the island spoke of the stone house, the tame wolves, and the singing woman. Some said she turned men into animals. Some thought it was only a story sailors told to frighten one another. Circe did not chase the stories. She kept her own order inside the island. One day she planted a root deeper in the garden. Another day she looked into the aging eyes of a lion in the courtyard. Another night she heard the coming of a distant storm while tightening thread at the loom. Her power no longer flashed in a single act. It had entered the air of the whole house. The sailors who came showed her the parts of human nature that did not change. One group pushed one another the moment they saw food. Another waited respectfully at the door. Some were foolish enough to throw stones at the animals. Circe did not show the same face to all of them. In her house, guest right required something in return. The hungry could be fed, but the crude could be made to see the shape of their own crudeness. In stories, her turning of men into animals looks like a punishment placed on them from outside. In Circe's eyes, every change revealed what the visitor had already carried within. Still, this did not make her innocent. Whoever used power had to carry its weight, whatever reason stood behind it. Circe knew this, but she would not stop protecting her island. Her loneliness did not disappear. Animals kept her company. Plants answered her. The sea struck the shore each night with its stubborn sound, but human speech was different. In most people who came to her, Circe found not conversation, but desire. One wanted food, another safety, another pleasure, another forgetfulness. Few tried to see the woman before them, so her song kept its beauty, but a faint sadness moved through it. Those who heard it did not understand that sadness. They heard only sweetness. Circe, while arranging her threads at night, understood more clearly that the price of the place denied to her in the palace was silence. One evening the sea rose with a breath unlike its usual sound. The wind did not come from the south. It circled the island and brought a thin smell of salt to the door. Circe was passing a thread through the loom when it snapped under her fingers. It was a small thing, but small things on Aeaea often warned of movement ahead. The animals raised their heads at the same time. A wolf walked toward the courtyard gate. A lion opened its eyes in the shade. Circe stopped singing. She could not yet see ships on the horizon, but she smelled human weariness carried from the sea. A man with a heavy fate and a tired company was nearing her island. She left the broken thread untied. Some breaks should not be mended at once. One must first see what has opened. She prepared the cups for the table, entered the room of dried herbs, and opened a jar she had not used in a long time. Aeaea had begun to receive the newcomers. Circe would no longer only wait. She would test. Many ships had passed the island before and vanished beyond the coast. Each had left a small trace in her mind, a torn sail, uneven oars, men arguing before they came ashore. Circe watched not how people came to the sea, but how they answered fear. Some became respectful when afraid. Some became rougher. Some pretended courage and grew careless. When Odysseus's ship approached, she sensed not only new guests, but a new trial. The broken thread had answered a different rhythm coming from the sea. That thread remained untied, because some meetings begin to loosen the old order before they even start. That night, as Circe prepared the table, every movement carried the weight of earlier visitors. The cups were chosen not only for drink, but for trial. The herbs were set aside not only for taste, but to touch the doors of the will. Yet there was no haste on her face. She arranged the house like a host, measured like a witch, and listened like a lonely woman. When her song began again, it came lower than on other nights. She did not need to call loudly. Hunger follows smoke. Weariness follows a warm house. Curiosity follows a song. So Aeaea drew the newcomers toward itself, without opening its doors with noise. Inside the stone house, cups waited. Outside, the animals took their places. The sea kept striking the shore like a distant fate. As Odysseus's ship neared the shores of Aeaea, the men no longer carried the bright pride of warriors returning from Troy. Salt, wind, and a long voyage had weighed down their shoulders. Each new shore had taught them to see both rescue and trap in the same land. When the ship entered shallow water, one man said he wanted to kiss the earth. Another muttered that an island this quiet was not a good sign. Odysseus stood near the prow. His beard had grown rough with sea salt, and his eyes stayed alive despite lack of sleep. To him, going ashore did not only mean rest. Every land carried its own law. Eurylochus came beside him and pointed to the smoke rising above the island. There was a house in the forest, he said, but no one could know whether that smoke called to a feast, a funeral, a welcome, or magic. Odysseus did not answer at once. He first listened to the silence of the shore. Hunger moved through the ship before speech did. The men checked their vessels, counted the food left, and looked again at the smoke behind the trees. When Odysseus brought them ashore, even their steps on the sand were cautious. Some knelt and held the hard earth in their palms. Others kept checking the ropes of the ship, as if tying themselves to land could be as dangerous as trusting the sea. Eurylochus suggested that a smaller group be sent ahead. There was no challenge in his voice. It held the dry attention of a man who had smelled danger from far away. Odysseus agreed. The men began whispering who would go and who would stay. At last, a group was chosen. Eurylochus agreed to lead them, though the lines on his face showed that this was more burden than honor. Odysseus told him to bring back what he saw, neither enlarged nor diminished. Eurylochus answered with a short nod. The path inland looked softer than they expected. The trees were thick, but they allowed passage. The wind passed through the leaves in a steady rustle. Those who remained by the ship watched the others disappear into the forest. For a while, footsteps could still be heard. Then only birds and distant animals remained. Odysseus watched that disappearance for a long time. Leadership sometimes required a harder act than going oneself, sending others into the unknown. The tired eyes of his men were on his back. One man said the scouts would return with good signs. Another answered that no good sign was ever this quiet. Odysseus did not let the argument spread. He told each man to return to his work. But he himself did not leave the shore. His eyes stayed on the dark mouth of the forest. Aeaea did not act like an enemy from the outside. The waves were calm. The forest did not close like a gate. No dark omen appeared in the sky. That made the island harder to read. Odysseus thought that clear threats sometimes showed mercy, because they told a man what stood before him. Here nothing gave its name. Smoke rose, but did not call. Animal sounds came, but did not announce attack. Sun touched the leaves, yet the forest stayed shadowed inside. Odysseus touched the side of the ship with his hand. The hardness of the wood reminded him of the sea's reality. For a moment he thought of the shores of Ithaca. He did not let the thought last long. A man who wants to go home must not let the image of home grow so large on every island that it makes danger small. For a long time no sound came from the forest. There was no laughter from the men who had gone, and no cry for help. This uncertainty changed the air by the ship. The men spoke less. Some said Eurylochus' name, and then fell silent. Odysseus knew he was in one of those moments when patience was as necessary as a sword. If he followed at once, he would divide the company. If he waited, he might delay what had happened inside. Meanwhile, on the other side of Aeaea, near her stone house, Circe also felt the wind shift. The thread at her loom tightened slightly under her fingers. She did not stop the song, but she turned her head toward the sea. The animals moved more carefully around the courtyard. Circe did not need to see the people on the shore to know they had come. The sea had carried the smell of human weariness into the forest. As Odysseus watched the men vanish among the trees, he knew each man by his walk. One stepped too hard, turning fatigue into anger. Another looked back again and again, as if to make sure the ship was still there. Eurylochus walked between them. He did not hide his fear, and he did not push it ahead of him. That was why Odysseus had chosen him. Men who look brave may follow the first sweet smell. A man who knows his fear might at least remember what he sees. When one of the men who had remained asked why the leader had not gone himself, Odysseus did not strike him with a harsh look. He said not every road could be walked by one man, and sometimes waiting was part of the duty. The answer ended the question, but it did not comfort anyone fully. As time stretched, small tasks on the ship began to look larger. One man checked a worn rope far longer than needed. Another put an empty vessel back as if it were full. Waiting made every hand search for something to do. Odysseus saw this and told the men to gather water, watch the shore, and keep the sails ready. The orders were simple, but they gathered the scattered fear. Then he looked again toward the forest. The trees did not move. If there was a trap there, it was not a shouting trap. If there was hospitality, it was too silent. The lines in Odysseus's face hardened between the two. Aeaea, in its first hour, had begun to test him with a patience unlike the battlefield. By late afternoon, the weight grew heavier. The men on the shore had already measured in their minds when the scouts should have returned. Each man used a different measure. To one, the path should have been short. To another, conversation in a strange house might take longer. Odysseus did not let this uncertainty show on his face. He only went down to the waterline, touched the sea with his palm, and tested the wind. The scent of Aeaea was now more mixed with salt, resin, smoke, and the warm smell of food came all the way to the shore. This scent lifted the men's hopes again. Odysseus sensed in it a welcome that should not be rushed. Even the smell of an island could be more dangerous than words. As the day lowered, Odysseus's patience became more visible. He did not hurry, but he missed no sign. He looked separately at sky, sea, and forest. A leader's waiting was different from the waiting of his men. They waited for news. He also waited to learn what he would do if no news came. The shore of Aeaea deepened that quiet difference. In the house, Circe showed neither delight nor fear. Humans who came to Aeaea often sent their hunger, hurry, and expectations ahead of themselves. She knew them. But this time there was something else in the wind, the heavy scent of an unbroken will. She sat at the loom and drew the thread forward without breaking it. Those who were coming toward her door first had to pass through the island path, the eyes of the animals, and their own curiosity. On the shore, Odysseus still looked toward the forest. In the house, Circe still sang. They had not yet seen each other, but the same island was now full of both their waiting. As Eurylochus and the men moved among the trees, Aeaea did not break its silence. Sometimes silence exists not to hide, but to make the one who comes hear his own voice more clearly. Darkness was drawing closer. Eurylochus walked in front, but he did not hurry. The forest path looked too clean. Branches did not strike their faces. Bushes did not catch their feet. It was as if an unseen hand had drawn back the growth to open a way. This ease did not calm the men. Long sea journeys teach a man to look for the cost behind every gift. One of the younger men said such a clear path meant people had used it. An older sailor answered that not every place where people had passed was safe. Eurylochus told them to be quiet. His voice was not harsh, it was only low, as if the forest should not hear too much. The smell of resin, damp earth, and crushed herbs grew heavy. Then a warm scent came from far ahead, like cooked food. Hunger drew the men's attention faster than fear. Eurylochus saw it and thought that the most dangerous doors sometimes opened with the best smells. At a bend in the path, wolves appeared. The men stopped at once. Hands went to sword hilts and spear shafts, but the wolves did not attack. Their eyes were bright and their bodies strong, yet they came closer like dogs, softly moving their tails. This gentleness was more frightening than the danger the men had expected. One sailor tried to laugh, then heard the tremor in his own voice and stopped. Then lions appeared. They lifted their heavy heads, looked at the newcomers, and moved to the sides of the path. Eurylochus's throat went dry. He said plainly that they should turn back. The others argued that the animals had not attacked and that this might be a good sign. Hunger pushed their thoughts forward. Without taking his eyes off the animals, Eurylochus said good signs should not make a man feel this uneasy. But the group was already walking in the direction pulled by scent and curiosity. When the stone house came out from among the trees, the men were first struck by its loneliness. It was not part of a village or a fortress. It stood by itself in the forest, as if it ruled the silence around it. Its doors were open. In the courtyard, there were bowls, bundles of drying herbs, and clay jars waiting in the sun. From inside came a woman's song. The voice was clear, bright, and calm, but there was a curve in the song that made a person forget the road. The men looked at one another. One whispered that anyone who sang like that could not be an enemy. Eurylochus answered at once, "Who could know how an enemy would sing?" But his words were weak, because the song reached to the threshold, as if it could carry them inside without tiring them. The hard lines in the men's faces softened. Long fear and hunger wanted to rest for a moment before that sound. When Circe rose from the loom, no one could have said she was in a hurry. Her dress held the light quietly. Her hair rested around her shoulders like a wave, and her eyes separated the men one by one. She did not look at them as prey. She looked at them like late guests. Eurylochus feared not the softness of that gaze, but its measure. Circe stood in the doorway and said they were tired, and that her house held food and rest. There was no hardness in her voice that sounded like command, yet the men turned toward her. One of them said they had come from a long road and needed hospitality. Circe nodded them inside. Eurylochus came as far as the threshold, then stopped. His feet seemed rooted to the stone. One of the men entering called to him and said there was nothing here to fear. Eurylochus did not answer. His eyes were on Circe's hands. For Eurylochus, staying outside looked like cowardice, but what spoke inside him was not only fear. Nothing on the road had behaved naturally. The animals had not attacked. The forest had not blocked them. The house had opened too easily. In such places, the one who stays outside and watches may be the one who carries the truth. As the men turned toward the table inside, Eurylochus moved into the shadow at the edge of the courtyard. Circe saw him. Her eyes rested on him for a brief moment. She did not force him, did not ask his name, did not ask him to explain why he stayed. That made it worse. A host who did not grow angry when a guest refused the invitation seemed far too sure of her own order. From outside the wall, Eurylochus heard the song stop. In its place came the sound of vessels, the crushing of herbs, and the low murmur of men relaxing as they sat at a table. Before reaching for the food, one of the sailors asked Circe what land she belonged to. Circe did not answer with a smile. She only said that this house stood on Aeaea, and that those whose road led them here should first set down their weariness. It was not as clear as a name, but most of the men wanted nothing more. Hunger quickly pushed curiosity aside. Outside the door, Eurylochus heard that uncertain answer and clenched his teeth. A person should think twice before sitting at the table of a host who would not name herself. But inside, the men had already divided their thoughts among bread, wine, and rest. Circe's voice had lowered their guard. She did not smile cruelly. She had more the calm of one whose order was being tested again. Aeaea did not forget those who entered its door. That day, It also remembered the fear of the man who stayed outside and ran. When the men sat at the table, the first thing they felt was not fear but relief. Their mouths, hardened by salt water, recognized at once the soft smell of cheese, the bright sweetness of honey, and the simple fullness of barley meal. Circe did not watch them from far away. She moved around the edge of the table. Hunger was one of the fastest ways to draw out a person's true face. One man reached for the cup and forgot to thank her. Another tried to hide the shaking of his hands before breaking the bread. There was no hardness on Circe's face. She told them they were tired and should drink first and speak after. The men took this as hospitality. One of them asked the name of their host. When Circe gave it, a brief silence passed through the room. She did not add that she was the daughter of Helios. She did not try to crush them with her bloodline. Here, bloodline did not decide the matter. The hand reaching for the cup and the courage to pass through the door mattered more. As the cups were filled, the smell of the room changed. Wine carried the familiar softness of cheese, barley, and honey, but underneath it lay a sharper trace, the kind left on the fingers when a leaf was crushed. The men could not separate it. Long travel teaches the nose to search only for food. Circe's fingers rested briefly above the vessels. Then she placed each cup before its drinker. One man wished that the gods might bless her. Circe said that the kindness of the gods was not always easy to understand. The sentence passed like a small riddle, and no one stopped over it. The first mouthfuls were taken. One man closed his eyes and sighed. Another said it was the best drink he had tasted since Troy. Laughter rose, then slowed. Outside, Eurylochus heard how that laughter grew shorter against the stone walls. The spell did not fall like a sudden darkness. First, the edges of speech softened. A man stopped in the middle of a sentence and stared at the bread in his hand, as if he had forgotten what he meant to do with it. Another man's laughter grew thick in his throat. Circe stood at the end of the table and waited. There was no hurry in that waiting. It was the patience of someone who knew the mixture would find its own path. In the men's eyes, there came first confusion, then a brief resistance that looked almost like anger. One tried to stand, but his knees struck the chair. Another tried to ask Circe what she had done, but his voice broke before it fully stopped being human speech. Circe raised her wand. The movement was not violent, but its certainty could not be argued with. In that moment, the men began to loosen not only in their bodies, but in the habits that had held them human. The change did not become a display of horror, but it was frightening enough. The way their hands clung to the table changed. Shoulders dropped. Eyes shifted from human anger to animal confusion. Some drew back. Some sank to the floor. Some opened their mouths as if they still wanted to remember their own names. Circe looked at their faces. She did not watch with joy, and she did not watch with panic. To her, the cup had made visible the crude hunger, disorder, and easy surrender already inside them. Yet even this thought did not fully lighten the weight of the scene. A moment earlier they had names. Now they were being guided toward a pen behind the courtyard. Circe directed them with her staff. With every step, the human sound in the room grew less. Outside the door, Eurylochus felt his knees almost fail. He could not see the whole thing. but he heard enough to understand that the friends who had entered were no longer present in the same form. Eurylochus did not move toward the door. For a moment he thought he should rush inside. Then he noticed how his hand shook on the hilt of his sword. The woman inside was mistress of the island where even wild animals had grown gentle. If he entered alone, he would not be help. He would be another loss. The thought brought shame, but shame did not stop him. It was also what would keep him alive. He stepped back, first slowly, then faster as soon as he found the forest path. Behind him remained the stone house, the song, the sound of vessels, and the half-finished human voices of his companions. A wolf watched him pass through the trees, but did not attack. That non-attacking gaze made it harder to run. Eurylochus forced down his breath and turned toward the shore. By the time he reached it, he was not sure he could put what he had seen into words, because some fears are too heavy, not only to see, but to carry. Inside the house, Circe gave no speech of victory. The words she had used while offering the cups had not risen like a chant. They had fallen like the calm sentences of a good host. That was why the men missed the danger inside comfort. When one man's fingers loosened around his cup, the man beside him laughed and accused him of getting drunk. But the end of that laughter thickened in his own throat. Circe did not leave the head of the table. Her eyes moved from one man to another. Some tried to resist, some surrendered before understanding, some still reached for food. Even before the body began to change, habit was hard to leave. This was one of the most painful parts of the scene. Outside, Eurylochus thought of calling Odysseus's name, but the ship was too far and the house was too close. In the back enclosure, the changed men remained inside a confusion in which they could not know their own voices. Circe did not bend over them in pity. She did not turn victory into a show. She signaled the silent nymphs who served in the house to close the doors. Then she lifted one of the half-finished cups and held it to the light. The surface of the wine was still calm. That calm made the harshness of what had happened more clear. Hands that had just drunk from those cups had been pushed into another state, yet nothing in the stone house had overturned. No wall had shaken. For Circe, the most unsettling transformations sometimes happened in silence. The world often did not move when a person lost his form. When Eurylochus reached the ship, his legs carried him, but his voice had not yet returned. Those waiting on the shore first saw that he came alone, then saw the color of his face. The men gathered around him. One asked where the others were. Another demanded to know what they had found in the forest. Eurylochus opened his mouth, but at first only breath came out. Odysseus pushed through the crowd and came near. He did not shake him and did not shout. He knew that to get the truth from a frightened man, one must first clear away the salt crusted over fear. At last, Eurylochus spoke. He described the path in the forest, the wolves that did not attack, the tame lions, and the song coming from the stone house. Then his voice stopped. Odysseus stepped closer and asked what had happened inside. Eurylochus closed his eyes for a moment. He said the men had entered, drunk from the cups, and then a change had begun, that no human voice could explain. The air around the ship broke at once. Some argued that this was not magic, only fear made larger. Others looked at Eurylochus's face and wanted no more proof. Odysseus stood before him. "Do not hide what you saw," he said. "Say it, even if it comes out broken." This time Eurylochus spoke more sharply. He said the men who went inside no longer had the walk, speech, or gaze of men. He said Circe had driven them toward a pen. When the words were finished, the crowd did not settle. It grew more confused. One sailor wanted to cut the ship loose at once. Another said that leaving their friends there would follow them for the rest of their lives, even if they reached home. Eurylochus turned to Odysseus and said plainly that going back there would be madness. There was cowardice in the sentence, but also a fierce wish to live. Odysseus did not mock him. Still, the lines in his face grew heavy. When he said he would go to save his men, he did not speak like a hero making a grand vow. He named the work that had to be done. Eurylochus stepped in front of him. His hands trembled, but his eyes did not turn away. He told Odysseus that if he threw himself into fire for every loss, there would be no one left to lead home. That sentence sent a brief chill through the ship, because there was hard truth in it. Odysseus was silent for a moment. Leadership sometimes required not only courage, but hearing another man's justified fear. Then he touched Eurylochus's shoulder. He said the only witness who returned had done his duty, and now his own duty began. The men understood from that calm that the decision would not change. Odysseus took his weapon. When the sword strap settled on his shoulder, the voices on the ship died one by one. No one stepped forward a second time to stop him. He promised no one victory. He only told them to wait and keep the ship ready. Then he left the shore. The forest path was the same path, but it had become another road. The passage the hungry men had taken with curiosity was now being walked by one man alone. Odysseus saw broken branches, mixed footprints, and the dragged mark of a sandal near a stone. Each small sign gave flesh to Eurylochus's words. Anger rose inside him, but he did not let it enter his steps. If he reached Circe's house in anger, he would give the house's order an opening. So he walked slowly. At one point, the sound of the forest changed. The birds did not fall silent, but they drew farther away. In the middle of the path stood someone who looked like a young man. He carried the lightness of a traveler, but in his gaze there was a speed that did not belong to humans. Odysseus moved his hand toward his sword, but did not draw it. The stranger asked where he was going alone. The question was simple, but the way it echoed in the forest was not ordinary. Odysseus understood at once that this was not a shepherd or a passing traveler. It was Hermes, messenger between gods and men, the one who could appear on the road at the necessary moment. Hermes said he knew that Odysseus's men were held in Circe's house. He said this without mockery and without pity. He only reminded him that time was growing short. Odysseus accepted divine help without putting pride first. He wanted his men back, and he understood that a sword alone would not be enough. Hermes knelt and put his fingers into the soil to draw out a plant hidden among ordinary herbs. Before leaving the shore, Odysseus had looked back once. The faces of his men were caught between wanting to stop him and needing to trust him. Eurylochus stood apart from the others. Being believed had not comforted him. It had made what he saw feel heavier. Odysseus had told him to keep the ship ready. Eurylochus nodded, but could not keep from asking what they should do if Odysseus did not return. The question made the shore sharply silent. Odysseus looked at the sea for a moment. Then he told them to wait until sunset, and after that to do what wind and reason told them. The answer made no one happy, but it was true. When he entered the forest, the sounds of the shore quickly faded. He was far from his men's eyes and from Eurylochus's warning. Alone, fear took a clearer shape. There was no crowd to hide it. Yet that clarity sharpened his mind. He tried to separate each sign. Which branch was broken? Which print was newer? Which smell came from a table and which came from herbs? In one place he bent to the ground and found a small piece of leather torn from one of his men's sandals. He held it briefly in his palm, then set it down again. That little piece reminded him that the ones lost inside were not numbers. They were men with names, faces, anger, and the wish to go home. In the clearing where Hermes appeared, the air was clearer than in the rest of the forest. Light falling through the trees did not rest on the stranger's shoulders. It seemed to pass around him. Seeing this, Odysseus understood that the figure before him resembled a human while standing far from humanity. Hermes had youth in his face, but in his eyes were the ages of Rhodes. He did not ask Odysseus if he was in a hurry. He seemed to know that hurry had brought him here. When Odysseus said he wanted to save his men, Hermes bowed his head. He said humans named their burdens even in the most dangerous moments, while gods often saw where those burdens led. These words were not advice so much as a sign of the road's weight. The root resisted the soil. When Hermes pulled it free, a black knot appeared, and above it was a flower white as milk. The god said mortals could not easily pull it up, and that its name was moly. When Odysseus took the plant, he felt that he held not a weapon, but the knowledge of resistance. Hermes told him not to refuse Circe's drink. He would drink it. The magic would not take hold, and at that moment he must draw his sword and make her swear not to harm him. Odysseus said nothing for a short time. To enter a goddess's house, drink from her cup, and then draw a sword was a narrow path. Hermes saw this and reminded him that courage was not the same as blindness. Then he withdrew into the same quiet from which he had come. Odysseus hid the moly in his clothing and walked toward the song from the stone house. The next door would open not by courage alone, but by this hidden knowledge. The road was calling him now. He felt it and did not look back. The house was near. When Odysseus left the clearing where Hermes had appeared, the forest sounds settled back into place. Yet nothing sounded as uncertain as before. The moly was hidden inside his clothing. Its black root reminded him of the closed depths of the earth, and its white flower of a clear resistance rising out of darkness. He pressed his fingers briefly against the place where it lay. He did not carry a great weapon there, but he carried divine knowledge. Hermes's instruction had been simple. He would not refuse the drink. He would wait for the spell to fail. Then he would draw his sword and make Circe swear she would do him no harm. The danger in simple plans was that every movement had to happen at the right time. Odysseus knew this. If he moved too early, Circe would prepare. If he moved too late, he might move closer to the fate of his men. As he walked, Eurylochus's words took shape again among the trees. The singing woman, the men entering, the fear left outside, then the change no human voice could explain. Odysseus did not push these words from his mind. Instead of trying to erase fear, he gave it order. A leader may need to look fearless, but a leader who denies fear inside himself enters the wrong door. So he walked while remembering everything. In the earth he saw a print that might have belonged to one of his men. Near a stone he found a torn piece of leather. He held it for a moment, then put it down. Those held inside were not numbers. They were men with names, faces, tempers, and the desire to return home. When he reached the courtyard, the animals saw him. One wolf rose and lowered its head to take in his scent. A lion on a sun-warmed stone only lifted its eyes. Odysseus did not take their calm as safety. On Aeaea, calm was not proof that danger was absent. It was proof of Circe's order. Around the courtyard stood bundles of dried herbs, clay jars, oil vessels, and roots set in the sun. None of it seemed random. Each thing appeared prepared for its own hour and effect. Odysseus passed among them without drawing his sword. A sword drawn too soon would become impatience. From inside the door came Circe's song. It was beautiful and controlled. It called without forcing. It left the door of curiosity open. Circe did not receive him at once. She finished the last line of her weaving, set the thread in place, and only then looked up. Odysseus felt her gaze. It touched not only his face, but his walk, his hands, and the way he crossed the threshold. Circe separated him from the others. This man was hungry, tired, and marked by sea and war, but he read the room before reaching for the table. She told him to enter. Her voice was soft, but beneath the softness was the power of one who knew the place of everything in her own house. Odysseus bowed his head. He made himself seem like a traveler fallen from the road, but his eyes watched the loom, the cups, the shadows by the door, and Circe's hands. She did not ask his name. She said he should first lay down the weight of the road. When he sat, the smell of the room grew stronger. Dried herbs, wine, honey, cool stone, and a hearth that had not long been cold. Before Circe prepared the cup, she watched him. "You can give your name later," she said. "First let the road leave your body." Odysseus heard the test inside the words. He answered that weariness could slow speech, but it did not have to silence the mind. A movement crossed Circe's face, so slight it was almost invisible. She understood that he would not be an easy guest. Still, she began. Wine turned dark in the vessel. Barley and honey softened it. The hidden herb essence slipped under the familiar scents. Odysseus watched without showing how closely he watched. Before the cup reached him, quick images moved through his mind. The men waiting by the ship, Eurylochus's pale face, Hermes pulling the black root from the earth, the cold clarity of the white flower, and the lost names of the companions held inside. He drew them into one line. Anger would not be enough in this house. It had to reach the edge of the sword at the right moment, and not before. When Circe held out the cup, the room grew thick with silence. Even the animals outside seemed to move less. Odysseus took the cup. Light broke across its surface. No danger could be seen. That was exactly what made it dangerous. The moly lay hidden in his clothing. The strongest protection was the one no one else could see. Before he drank, he looked into Circe's eyes. There was not only a host's courtesy there, but the patience of someone waiting for a result. She expected him to drink and then begin to come apart like the others. Odysseus saw that expectation and closed his face against it. For one thin moment, road, ship, Hermes, Eurylochus, and all the quiet order of Aeaea gathered around a single cup. Odysseus would drink, Circe would wait. The black root and white flower would do their work unseen. Odysseus drank. The taste was not as harsh as he had expected. Honey and wine hid the force of the herbs like a soft covering. As the spell moved down his throat, a heavy mist tried to circle his body. A wave rose that would slow his thoughts, loosen his hand, and draw his tongue away from his own name. But the moly worked in silence. The resistance of the black root and the clarity of the white flower formed an unseen boundary before the wave. Odysseus's hand did not change. His gaze did not blur. His voice did not disappear. When he set the cup on the table, the small sound it made was sharper than expected in the stone room. Circe's face did not fall apart. She was not young or careless enough to reveal herself easily, but a short, clear pause appeared in her eyes. The collapse she had expected had not come. Odysseus caught that pause. Hermes' warning opened in his mind like a single line. He stood quickly and drew his sword. Its brightness flashed in the cool room like a brief star. Circe stepped back, but she did not scream. Outside, the animals raised their heads. The threads on the loom seemed to tighten even in the still air. Odysseus demanded his men. There was no pleading in his words, but no wild anger either. He spoke with the hard need of a tired leader. Circe asked who he was. When he gave his name, a new silence entered the room. She saw that the man before her was not only protected by Hermes, he carried weight through his own name and journey. The failure of her spell had wounded her certainty, but it had also awakened her curiosity. Odysseus asked her to swear that she would not harm him, and that she would return his men to their human form. The point of the sword was less a threat than a line. Circe understood the line. Her gaze moved from the blade to his face. Those who had entered her house before had fallen to hunger, fear, or the power inside the cup. This man had drunk and remained standing. Circe stepped back. It was not the collapse of defeat. It was the measured acceptance of a goddess who had to change her own order for the first time. She swore not to harm him. The air in the room opened a little, but trust did not appear. Trust never came all at once on Aeaea. Circe moved toward the place where the transformed men were kept, and Odysseus followed. He lowered the sword, but he did not forget it. The air was heavier in the pen. The changed men drew back when Circe came in. Their bodies were altered, but in their eyes remained recognition, fear, and a thin human wish for help. Seeing those looks, Odysseus felt his anger rise again. Circe opened a small vessel. The scent that rose from it was not like the sweet weight of the earlier drink. It was sharper and cleaner, like the first coldness of a misty morning. Odysseus told her there was no room left for games. Without turning her head, Circe answered that she had given her word, and on Aeaea a given word stood heavier than her magic. She raised her wand. This time the movement did not press downward. It lifted and untied. The change back was not a great display, but every detail was heavy. First the eyes cleared. Then the muffled sounds came nearer to human speech. Then shoulders, hands, and faces returned to the shapes they had known. The men fell to the ground. Some stared at their fingers. Some covered their faces with both hands. Some tried to say Odysseus's name and found their voices shaking. They were restored, and as the old tales say, they seemed younger, stronger, and more alive. Yet under that new life lay the shame of what they had endured. Odysseus called them each by name. He did not tell them to forget. Forcing a man to forget such a thing would make him smaller a second time. Circe did not break the silence. She read the marks of what she had done on their faces. Silent nymphs in Circe's house brought water, clean clothes, and a new meal. At first the men tensed at every touch. When warm water reached their bodies, some closed their eyes. Others kept checking the door. When Eurylochus and the men at the ship heard the news, they came toward the stone house slowly. Eurylochus stopped at the threshold, his eyes fixed on Circe. She did not force him. She said that a man who knew how to stay outside sometimes saved lives too. The words did not comfort him, but they were not an insult. He entered, though for a long time he kept his back near the wall. Later that night, when the table was set again, no one took the first bite in haste. Each man looked first at Odysseus, then at Circe. She prepared the cups openly this time. Herbs, water, wine, and honey were mixed before their eyes. Odysseus took the first cup himself, smelled it, and drank a small mouthful. When nothing happened, the tension around the table loosened a little. Circe saw it and did not act as if she had won. She sat near Odysseus. The sword and the cup of the earlier scene still stood between them in memory. The house hung between hostility and hospitality. Odysseus asked why she had done this to his men. Circe said many men entered her door in human shape, but revealed their lack of measure at the table. Odysseus did not fully accept this. He said weakness did not give her the right to shape men as she pleased. Circe's face hardened, then softened. She answered that men who looked strong often behaved as if they owned even the house where they were guests. The small clash did not break the truce. It prevented each of them from seeing the other as a simple figure from a tale. Outside, night settled over the courtyard. The animals moved around the edges without coming in. Under the light of the stone house, Odysseus's men sat again with human faces, and Aeaea began to look not only like fear, but like a weary shelter. Their stay on Aeaea began as a necessary healing. Odysseus's men washed, ate, and slept in order to throw off the weight of the sea, fear, and transformation. Circe's house was no longer a closed danger, but a shelter that had to be approached with care. Still, not everyone grew calm at the same speed. Some relaxed quickly once food returned. Others remembered their fear each time they saw animals moving in the courtyard. Eurylochus was never the first to reach for anything Circe offered. When a cup was lifted, he paused. When food came, he smelled it. When her song came through the doorway, he turned his face away. His caution drew a thin line under the peace of the house. Circe began to see Odysseus at different hours. War and command had set a hard order on his face, but early in the morning, when he looked toward the shore, a longing for home appeared under that hardness. Ithaca was not a name he spoke often. It lived more in his silences. Circe understood. A human being carries home not only as land, but as faces left behind and words not yet completed. Odysseus also watched Circe in her garden and saw that her power was not only the trap of the feast. He saw how carefully she lifted a root, how her steps changed when she passed a wounded animal. In that year, his men changed too. At first, they took long paths to avoid the animals. Months later, they learned to sit in the courtyard without fearing the shadow of a wolf. Yet this learning did not erase the old fear. When wine cups were raised, a short silence sometimes fell before someone tried to laugh it away. Gysa's danger changed its shape as days lengthened. The first fear had been sharp and easy to name. It kept men awake. The peace that followed was quieter and perhaps harder. The sailors sat in the courtyard in clean clothes, fed and rested. Some laughed, some told old stories of the road, and some almost forgot what they would do when they reached home. Circe's song no longer sounded like a trap drawing them inward. It sounded like a rhythm softening the night. For that reason, Aeaea became both shelter and danger of forgetting. A person can lose the road not only through pain, but through comfort. The bond between Odysseus and Circe deepened in this slow time. It was not simply an enemy's peace after magic had failed. Each had seen the other's boundary. Circe found in Odysseus a will that did not easily come apart. Odysseus saw in Circe the coldness of abandoned power and the hardness that protects. Their talks did not become long speeches. More often, they stood near one another while walking in the garden, listening to the wind by the shore or watching the lamps dim after the men slept. Circe showed him certain herbs, which called sleep, which softened fear, which could take a person away from himself if given in the wrong measure. One morning she showed him a bitter plant growing near the rocks. Too much of it could cloud the mind, she said. The right measure could cool a fevered body. Odysseus listened, but he watched not only the plant, he watched how her face changed when she shared knowledge. In that moment, she seemed less a dangerous witch than someone who read the world carefully. Another evening, Odysseus spoke of a scent that reminded him of the olive trees of Ithaca. Circe did not press the word, but she saw his eyes look for a moment beyond the shore. What grew between them came less from promises than from noticing each other's longing. The year passed in this way. The seasons did not greatly alter Aeaea, but the angle of light, the scent of herbs, and the color of the sea changed. The men regained strength. Repairs to the ship were finished, yet no one spoke loudly of departure for a long time. In the end, Odysseus's men were the ones who named it. One evening after the meal, when the silence had stretched, one of them said they needed to return home. The words were simple, but they changed the air. Others showed that they carried the same desire. Odysseus lifted his head and understood that he had been putting the thought aside for a long time. Ithaca had not been forgotten. It had only been pushed away by the soft order of Aeaea. When Circe heard it, she did not turn away at once. She had known they would go. A goddess who understood borders and change also understood that a traveler could not remain forever on one shore. Yet knowing did not remove feeling. The fact that Odysseus had to go made him not less valuable but more human. Part of what binds one person to another is the way a person answers another call even when he wants to stay. That night, Circe did not sing. She sat before the loom, but did not pass the thread. Outside, the animals were quiet. The sea stretched in darkness like a road. Aeaea's peace looked openly temporary for the first time. Odysseus went down to the shore that night. Circe stood beside him. They did not think first of the cup and sword of their meeting. They felt how quietly a year can take root. For Circe, this separation would not simply be a return to the old exile. For Odysseus, leaving meant turning away from the comfort that had made it possible to remain. Some shelters save a person. If stayed in forever, they close the road of fate. Though Circe accepted his leaving, it was not easy to watch the preparations begin. Every rope tied, every vessel carried, every oar set right, seemed to pull a piece of the house toward the sea. She did not speak to stop it. Most who came to Aeaea had wished to escape her. Odysseus was not escaping her. He was returning to his fate. This made the parting quieter and heavier. She gathered threads in the weaving room, set aside herbs for the journey, and tested the wind by the shore. Sometimes the best gift for a traveler is not advice, but the wind that can carry him. The next morning, the work on the island changed. It was no longer a time only for rest and healing. It was a time of departure. Circe understood then that her own role had changed too. She was no longer only the one who tested the man before her. She would be the one who sent him toward his next trials. Odysseus told Circe of his decision to leave in the early morning. The courtyard was not yet fully lit. The men were checking ropes, vessels, and sails, carrying the unease of returning to the sea after a long rest. The year on Aeaea had strengthened them, but none of them had forgotten how quickly the sea could change. When Odysseus stood before Circe, his words were neither triumphant nor light. He said he wanted to go home. He did not speak Ithaca's name loudly, but Circe heard the weight of the name in everything left unsaid. For a moment she answered nothing. Then she told him that a man who wanted to go home sometimes had to go first to the darkest door. Open surprise came into Odysseus's face. Circe knew his road did not run straight west or toward the shores he knew. She led him to the shadowed side of the house. There, dried herbs, sealed jars, and vessels for the voyage had been prepared. Yet these preparations did not look like the supplies for an ordinary sea journey. She told him he had to go to the shores of the dead and speak there with the shade of the blind seer Tiresias before the road home could truly open. Odysseus turned his head when he heard this. The voices of his men came from the courtyard, and the noise of the living suddenly seemed farther away. "To go home I must go among the dead?" he asked. Circe said it was less a descent than an arrival at a boundary. A living man had to draw near to the silent ones in order to hear his fate. Her voice was calm, but it was the calm of knowledge that could not be changed. Circe told him to steer toward the dark land of the Cimmerians, to the streams of Oceanus, and to make the necessary offerings there. She did not give the directions like dry instructions. She spoke as one who knew the meaning of each act, where the pit should be opened, what prayers should be spoken, how he should wait when the shades came, and whose voice he had to hear first. Odysseus listened closely. This was no longer only the dangerous host who had offered him a cup. Before him stood a guide who knew the language of the threshold between life and death. At one point, he wanted to ask how she knew all this, but he did not. During his year on Aeaea, he had understood that her knowledge did not come only from plants. Some knowledge belongs to those who have lived for a long time near borders. When the men heard of this journey, their first response was silence. They had expected the sea, but not a route toward the dead. Eurylochus did not hide his face. He asked Circe why men who had passed through enough darkness had to be sent toward another one. Circe did not look at him with anger. The question came from fear, but it was not unfair. She said, "Some roads do not disappear because we fear them." Odysseus told his men that this order belonged to his fate, and that no one would be wasted there without need. The words did not remove panic, but they gave it shape. The work around the ship grew quieter. Vessels were carried more carefully. Ropes were tied without noise. Even the animals of Aeaea moved less around the courtyard. When Odysseus and Circe went down to the shore, the sea was not still, but it did not rise in anger either. It seemed unsure whether to make departure easy or hard. Circe reminded him not only of the land of the dead, but of the dangers that would come after it, the voices of the sirens, the narrow passage of Scylla and Charybdis, and the need not to touch the sacred cattle of Helios. As she gave that last warning, a brief shadow crossed her face at her father's name. The daughter of Helios was warning a mortal not to touch the property of Helios. Odysseus understood the irony, but did not dwell on it. For him, every warning was a line that might bring his men closer to home. When Odysseus thanked her, Circe delayed her answer. She told him that holding someone back was not always love. Sometimes showing the road was the heavier bond. The sentence stayed between them. On Odysseus's face was the tiredness of a man who had to leave. In Circe's stance was the old weight of a goddess who had not chosen to stay, but had learned how to remain. The men boarded. The sails were set. Eurylochus looked back one last time. When his eyes met Circe's, he had not changed enough to say he no longer feared her, but respect had entered his fear. Circe saw it and did not mock him. Some people learn danger not by loving it, but by surviving it. The path Circe described did not resemble the maps Odysseus knew. There the weighting of shades mattered more than the names of coasts. When he asked whether Tiresias would truly answer, Circe said the dead did not answer every question, but they did not avoid telling a patient man what he did not wish to hear. This silenced Odysseus. He had survived many dangers, but hearing his own fate spoken clearly would be a different weight. As the final vessels were set on the ship, Circe repeated what he must not forget. The sirens, the tied body, the sealed ears, the straits, and the sacred cattle. Odysseus received each warning like a thin rope he would need to hold. When the ship left the shore, Circe gave the wind behind them. At first she did not sing. She only raised her hand and listened to the air. Then her voice rose softly. It was not like the first song that had drawn men to the threshold. There was farewell in it, not invitation, road knowledge, not trap, the sad strength of letting go, not the desire to possess. Odysseus looked back, but not for long. If a man wants to return home, there are shores he must not hold, even with his eyes. Circe remained on the shore. Behind her stood wolves and lions in silence. Before her, the sea opened wide and cold, carrying Odysseus's ship toward the country of the dead. After Odysseus's ship grew small on the horizon, Circe stayed on the shore for a long time. The morning wind came over the sea and dragged the edge of her dress across the stones. The marks left by the oars slowly faded. The animals waited behind her. The old lion rested its head on its paws. The wolves stood silently in the shadow of the rocks. Circe did not call them, and they did not come closer. Aeaea was not an island that shouted after those who left. It kept what it heard, listened to it, and carried it down into its roots. At last Circe lifted her hand toward the sea, but it was not a call. She did not ask the ship to return. She only accepted that the road she had given now belonged apart from her, and that the wind was carrying Odysseus toward dark waters and the shore of the dead. When she returned to the house, the first thing she did was not put away the cups. She gathered the breadcrumbs from the table, washed the bronze vessels, and set the fire in order again. These ordinary acts seemed to bring the island back to its old rhythm, yet every object held another trace. The threshold kept Eurylochus's pale fear. The large table kept the men's tired hunger. The shadow near the wall held the brief silence before Odysseus drew his sword. Circe did not try to erase these marks. Most who had come to Aeaea before had left only rumor and cautious footsteps behind. This time, something deeper remained in the stone house, the trace of a moment when magic met resistance, fear met loyalty, and hospitality met calculation. By noon she went into the weaving room. The loom stood where it had always stood. The threads were tight with a knot left from the night before. When Circe sat, her hand reached for the old melody, but no sound came at once. Her fingers moved over the thread, then stopped. There were no men's voices in the room, no oar sounds, only the distant strike of the sea and the faint crackle of drying herbs. Circe untied the first knot. Then, as she passed a new thread through, her song began very low. This time the melody did not hurry to lull those who came to the door. It carried first the morning at the shore, then the white flower with the black root, then the tired resolve on the face of the man who had drunk and not changed. The song no longer felt like a trap, it moved like memory. In the days that followed, Aeaea seemed from outside to return to itself. Wolves walked around the stone house in the evenings. The lion claimed the warm stone near the door. The plants gave their night scents more sharply. When Circe went into the garden, she noticed which leaves closed before rain and which roots held tighter to the soil against the salt wind. She had once read these signs only as the language of magic. Now she sometimes read them as the body of a tired traveler. This did not make her soft, but it widened her judgment. Not every person who came to her island was the same. Some followed hunger, some hid behind fear, some continued on the road even when they knew pain waited ahead. That was the strongest mark Odysseus left. One evening another ship appeared on the horizon. It was far away. Its sail showed for a moment in the last red of sunset and vanished. Circe watched from the courtyard. The wolf near the door lifted its ears. The ship did not come closer. Perhaps it saw the smoke. Perhaps the sailors remembered old warnings. Perhaps the wind simply turned. Circe did not know. Still, she walked to the door and set her hand on the stone frame. The house waited without asking who might come, but waiting no longer meant the same thing to her. When she went back inside, she did not prepare the table. She only placed a few dry branches on the hearth and watched the fire rise. Late that night, she sat again before the loom. The animals had taken their places around the house. The forest was silent like a wide cloth over the island's dark heart. As Circe passed the thread, she thought of how her name would be told from shore to shore. Some would remember only the witch who changed men into animals. Some would call her the goddess who fed her guests and then tested them. Some would remember the woman who showed a hero the road to the dead. None of these stories would be wholly false. None would hold her completely. Circe did not try to change that. Legends change shape in the hands of those who tell them, not those who live them. What remained in her hands was the tension of the thread, the scent of herbs, and the voice moving into night. Near dawn, the wind turned from the sea. Waves struck the rocks while the song moved through the open door, over the courtyard stones, into the calm breath of the animals, and through the wet leaves of the forest. Circe kept weaving without lifting her head. She no longer carried her loneliness as the punishment it had been on the first day. Aeaea had stopped being only the exile given to her. It had become a place of memory, where those who came were changed, and those who left remained in traces. Odysseus's journey would flow toward other darkness and other trials. Circe's part would remain at the quiet threshold of that road. Yet every threshold keeps something from those who pass through it. In the following days, Circe noticed that some of her habits had changed, though she did not name them as changes. When she reached for cups, she looked into them before filling them. When she gathered herbs, she separated not only those that clouded the mind, but also those that steadied a tired body. This difference had always existed in her, but now it carried more weight. For a time, Odysseus's men had eaten, slept, recovered, and gone back to sea on Aeaea. The island had not only transformed, it had also repaired. Circe did not want to admit that this had changed her. Still, there were times when she walked across the courtyard more slowly, as if looking for old footprints on the stones. One night the old lion would not leave the door. When Circe stepped outside, the animal raised its head and looked toward the sea. No ship showed in the dark. There was only a long sound among the waves. Circe did not kneel beside the lion or place her hand on its head. Their bond had never depended on open gestures. They simply stood together at the door for a while. The lion's breath was heavy, steady, and calm. In that moment, Circe understood more clearly what Aeaea had given her. Loneliness here was not emptiness. Sometimes it was the space needed for a mortal or a goddess to hear her own voice. Odysseus had passed through that space and gone on. What he left behind was not only loss, it was a change in the sound. Sometimes in the quietest hour of night, Circe left the loom and went into the courtyard. Even when the sky held no light of Helios, she did not forget whose blood she carried. But in darkness, the depth of Perseus spoke more clearly. The soil of Aeaea stayed cool under her bare feet. The scents of the plants opened different layers through the night. When Circe thought of the day she first came to the island, she no longer felt the same pain. The distance that had once seemed given to her as punishment had turned over the years into a form of focus she had chosen. She saw those who came, weighed them, tested them, and sometimes opened doors they did not know for their road forward. So her power deepened not only in the herbs in her hands, but also in her ability to wait, to separate, and to let go when the time came. That was why years later, sailors passing near the island thought they heard a woman's voice inside the wind. Perhaps they were mistaken. Perhaps they were only listening to the waves. Aeaea knew the voice was real. I hope that as you end your day, this ancient epic has been a good story for you. I look forward to your comments and requests. Do not forget to follow my channel. May the darkness of the night and the rhythm of the sea bring you peace. Until we meet again in another legend, in the breath of another hero, love.